Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Blazity Tech Talks. I am Jakub.
And I'm Hugo, and today we're going to talk about headless CMS.
Hi Hugo.
Hi Kuba.
So today we're talking about headless CMSs finally. Something that's very familiar to us, something
Definitely.
that we love. And actually, for you viewers, Hugo was working at Graph CMS and developing it from scratch like 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Right? It was quite some time ago, yeah.
Yeah. How was your experience with developing such product from scratch?
Very good times. Very, very insightful. Learned a lot. Yeah.
And now at least you're a true expert in that matter.
I mean, I kind of feel quite experienced with headless CMSs, sure. Especially that we work with them so much.
Yeah. So could you elaborate what makes CMS headless?
Sure. So traditionally, when we think about CMS, we think about not only storing our content, but also a way to display our content. And this is what historically the best example
of course, WordPress
would be WordPress. And the headless CMS is a CMS that's basically backend only, and it doesn't care or make any assumptions about how you display the data. It only stores and serves your data.
Would you say it serves as sort of an admin panel for your content?
I mean, in a way, for your content, sure. The one big thing about headless CMS is that most of the time, although not always, it is backed by some sort of vendor. It's not something that you install and maintain yourself.
Right.
So the admin panel usually comes from the vendor for managing your content. There are headless CMSs that allow you to make your own, but that's maybe further down in the discussion.
Right.
But yeah, you do have an admin panel, sure.
So in general, with headless CMS, we have CMS here, and we have our front end, our website, blog, web app, whatever here.
Yeah, and you don't even need to have a front end, right? Because with something like WordPress, you always have a front end. You might not use it. You might also use WordPress as sort of a headless CMS. But traditionally, what you do is you have all the data structure from WordPress, and that's directly tied to how WordPress looks. And it's usually a graphical representation of the posts, of the pages, in a form of like a predefined template from the WordPress directory or something you can make or install yourself. You always have that front-end part which displays all the data that you have.
Right.
And with headless CMS, you don't necessarily need to have that even, because you might have your own app that displays the data, but it might even be some embedded system. It might be a smart home appliance that uses the data. It might be virtually anything that can connect to anything else on the web.
So basically, headless CMS is very versatile in terms of where you want to display that data, right?
Yeah, you can have a blog with your daily blog posts, and you can also have a shopping list displayed on your smart fridge, all handled from the same CMS basically.
It's something you can't do with WordPress.
Yeah, I mean,
well, with the traditional, but maybe.
That wouldn't be a pleasant experience, most likely.
All right, so here it's first very big benefit, and would you list other benefits for us? What makes headless CMS better than traditional, if it's the case?
So I would say, apart from the fact that you gain more flexibility because of the fact that you're not tied to a certain way of displaying your data. One big thing is that you have most of the time a complete control over how your data looks. So for a good comparison, in WordPress you always have a data structure that comprises of posts, pages, tags, categories, and authors, basically.
That's the traditional one.
Yeah. You can extend that to a degree. It's really hard to change it at its core. You can add some additional fields to your posts maybe, or to the pages. But in the end, everything lives as this predefined data structure. And with headless CMS, it's more often than not the case that when you open up the headless CMS, when you create your account, create your project, you can basically define the data shape to whatever you want. Because maybe your app doesn't have any posts, maybe your app doesn't have any pages, You don't have to include that. You can make a shopping list that has an item. You can make.
Right.
You
So
can make
basically, you're completely in control of what data you want to have and use.
Yes, not only what data, but the exact shape of the data, right? You don't need to have any unnecessary things. And if your data gets more complicated, all the relationships between the data, you can model that out as you see fit. So it's immediately clear and obvious for people working with the data what the purpose of it is, basically. It's much easier to interact with it.
It makes headless CMS a lot more flexible, right? Because with WordPress, it's, I think, a lot of work to make it fit the data structure that you want. But with headless CMS, it's very easy because that's like step one of setup.
Yeah, you could say that. Basically, headless CMS are basically made for the modern age, so to speak, where the data requirements and data shape required for your product, for your app to work is a very custom one, and it doesn't reflect the posts, pages, authors categories of a traditional publishing platform, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And what can you tie it into? Because I understand that we were saying that you can even display data on the smart fridge if you want to. But
right.
what about front-end frameworks and technologies? Is it per vendor specific? So maybe Graph CMS you can only use with specific frameworks, or is it always very versatile?
Mm-hmm. So basically, that's tied again to the benefit that we don't have the front end, that we don't have a way to display the data, that you can basically use whatever you want. So whether that be a React Native app, whether that be a completely native app, whether that be a website, a web app, a desktop app, a smart device, a car. Whatever it is you want to design for, you can make the front end by yourself wherever you want, and then just read the data through the API, because that's in the end all you get in terms of your data. You just get a way to interact with your data.
Okay, so that's smart. That sounds really smart in terms of handling the data. And is there a reason to keep using the traditional CMS for another use cases than like blog posts? Why would you do that?
So I would say that there is still some use case to traditional CMSs. I would say that I wanted to say that maybe if they fit your use case perfectly, as in a publishing platform, it might be a good idea, but I think not. I think maybe it's most likely the question of your scale, I would say. So if you're just starting out, if you want a simple blogging platform, or like you just want to publish content, and the traditional CMS fits your requirements in a perfect way, because most of the time when you publish posts, you only have a post, you only have that has a category tag. So if you just want to start out with something like this, it might be a better solution to use a traditional CMS, because it also has a lower barrier to entry, in a sense that non-technical person will probably have much easier time of setting it up. Although that starts to not be the case anymore.
Because even for WordPress, you need someone to optimize it and optimize your plugins, and
not even that. I would say that that right now headless CMS is in like sort of partnerships with front-end frameworks like Gatsby, like Next.js, are starting to also develop sort of ways for non-technical people to be able to do that as well.
So more like drag and drop sort of coding.
Maybe not as much as drag and drop, but sort of like maybe a template library for people who want a blogging platform that's like really easy to set up.
Right.
So I would say that this might be a good use case for a traditional CMS. If you're already used to, say, working with WordPress and you want your own blog, then that's fine. I guess if you want some proof of concept, if you want to start your e-commerce journey and want to just test the waters, whether something will settle, then maybe it's also a good solution to use a traditional CMS for e-commerce. Those use cases probably. If you grow in scale, I would say that the bigger you grow, the more you start to notice the pain points of traditional CMSs.
Right, and especially if you're building applications rather than just websites that display some sort of data, right? Because the way I see it, as we're discussing, the headless CMS, I see it as a backend technology that just provides data like any other technology with API. So you can have payments platform that gives you an ability to, I don't know, have payments and subscriptions for your users. And then you can have headless CMS as your basically data for content.
Right.
And then you can have any other sort of vendor, Auth0 for authentication, and so on. So it more fits like a Lego piece into your whole backend ecosystem, sort of, right?
Right. So as you said, it perfectly fits into what we already talked about, which is Jamstack, of course.
Exactly.
And yeah, it basically, like, this again ties to the first point we mentioned, that you don't have a predefined way of displaying the data, like a predefined front end solution for that. You can do whatever you want with the data, and by that by the extension you can basically add whichever piece you need to it. So if your custom front end needs an authentication, you can do it by yourself. If it needs a payment system, you can do it by yourself, and you're not. Since with WordPress you can also like add an e-commerce layer to it. You can add an authentication because it has built-in users. You can add payment systems as well, newsletters, of course. But in the end, you're always tied to the platform, and every single integration, every single feature that you want to add, you have to take into account all the other features you've already added, whether they are compatible or not, and whether the feature that you want to have in your app is even compatible with WordPress. If it's easy to add it, or if you need to spend extra development time for it, if you have the time and money to maintain it, and it usually gets very, very messy very fast.
Feels messy.
Yeah.
And also you're building this monolithic structure that's just at some point it's going to fail.
Yeah, I mean, and most of the time it's you who's responsible for it. That's also the big part, because I think that perfectly ties to the next point, that headless CMS, one of the big benefits of headless CMS is that they are vendor's responsibility. So if we take Graph CMS, if you have all your content in Graph CMS, all your data, you are not responsible for the security and backups of it. If something goes wrong, it's not because you didn't take care of it. The vendor who's being paid to do so and has the domain expertise handles all of that, right?
Right. So rather than self-serving all the assets on our own servers and serving WordPress on our own server, we're just delegating all of that to the company that lives of doing that. They're just absolute experts in the field, and
has a custom architecture for it all, and takes care of security because they know their system in and out. Takes care of backups. So you don't have to take care of those things. And this is also really good for security as well, because WordPress, as far as backends go, is like everyone knows how WordPress looks like, and everyone knows exactly what WordPress consists of on every layer of the architecture, which on one hand can be good, but on the other hand is very prone, makes WordPress very prone to attacks.
Why is that? Is it because it's such a well-known architecture that everyone knows what exploits are there?
I mean, it's usually much easier to exploit something that you know every single detail of than it is to know something that's kind of a black box in a way. So that surely ties. That's surely tied to it. But generally speaking, there isn't. Like there is a team maintaining WordPress, but usually if you have like even a dedicated hosting solution for your WordPress site, no matter how big you are, it's usually just a hosting solution. And even if they do backups, they're usually not domain experts. They're
Right.
usually not experts in maintaining your,
And
your
hosting
WordPress. If
yeah.
something goes wrong in your admin panel, they can't immediately fix it. And you basically sacrifice all the domain knowledge.
It sounds like headless CMS would be something good for bootstrapping startups, because you're getting this huge piece of backend, and for almost every startup, or for many startups, you need to have this content layer where you communicate with your users. So it sounds like you can just outsource that to the CMS that's headless, and then you can just focus on the other parts of your product.
Exactly. I would say that's a really good approach, especially that building CMS system is very tricky. I can attest to that. And it's most of the time also for the benefits that we listed. So not having to care about backups and security, having the freedom to model your data. Every single aspect of that makes it perfect to store and manage your content.
Right. Maybe a little bit off topic, but what was the biggest challenge when you were working at the Graph CMS? What was the thing that just kept you up at night and that you guys couldn't figure out at the beginning?
I think I would have to think about that, but I'm not sure if there was one singular thing. I think that it was just a string of small challenges, but they never stopped coming. So it's every day is a new small challenge, which is a very nice thing to do.
So today we have a number of CMS solutions being built at the same time. I mean, they seem to just pop up out of nowhere every day. There's new CMS scene challenger. But I assume that migrating between the solutions isn't as tricky as migrating out of WordPress.
So I would say depends how you look at it. So for your data, migrating out of WordPress is not that big of a deal because it's all on a MySQL database that you can also interface with an API. The biggest problem when you migrate out of WordPress is that it's usually not only the data that you're migrating from.
And also, I mean, that's kind of what I meant.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
You also need to kind of build everything from scratch. You need your whatever was displaying your data, you need to build it from scratch.
And the problem is that if you do that, if you want to move to your custom solution, you have to kind of go around the fact that everything that you've built before on WordPress is tied to the WordPress data structure. So you either have to remake all of this and also transform your WordPress data and basically go about everything else almost from scratch with just your data being somehow like you just need to probably somehow automate your data transformation, and then you need to build everything from scratch anyways. Move your data to some other CMS, to maybe a headless CMS, maybe your own CMS, whichever one you would choose in that scenario. Whereas if you already use a headless CMS, it's because of how easy it is to interface with it, with an API, whether it's a REST API, a GraphQL API, you can usually very easily move the data away as well. Right.
So it's more like changing payments provider or something like that, right? Because you're just changing the
almost. It's sometimes it might be more complicated because some CMSs have like more specific data structures, or they have some not arbitrary but proprietary maybe some fields on your data, maybe some quirks that they did for publishing content, for drafts, for different stages of the content. But it's usually very straightforward to move the data, and more importantly, when you move the data, every single other piece of your app, of your product, of your architecture doesn't really need to change. Because you might need to adjust some things here or there to adhere to the new data structure, which like as I said might be like you might have a field that indicates whether an entry is published or not, and on one CMS it might be called is published.
No, but
the other can be called published.
Like normal thing when you're migrating between solutions, it's always going to happen.
But you're never in a situation where you have to basically remake your whole front end or remake your whole authentication system.
Yeah, and all the other Lego bricks remain unchanged, right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
you were using this CMS, you can migrate to this CMS while you still can have the same payments provider, authentication, and everything else.
You might even migrate back to WordPress at that point and still interface with WordPress as a sort of a headless CMS, because you can kind of do that. So
do that, yeah. I mean, that's do you think that, because we were saying that it's good for bootstrapping your startup, for example, and probably at some point where you start scaling, it's good to consider moving from traditional systems like WordPress to GraphCMS or other headless CMSs?
Yes, or rather, I would. If you expect that that you have a very custom needs in terms of the product that you need, or that if you expect to grow quickly, or if you expect to be at scale from day one, you probably should not consider WordPress, in my opinion.
Even as a starting point, because you will just waste more time.
I mean, you have to answer this by your own basically case, because all the time you put into WordPress, if you want to scale later, I don't want to say wasted time, but it will be something that that you basically, when you move to something custom, you'll have to abandon entirely, sort of. So it's good for validating ideas, I would say, like seeing if your product sells, or maybe seeing if people are interested in the content that you manage, that you provide. But if you want to go that one step further, or if you want to start bigger, then it's probably not a great idea.
Right. So basically, anytime you know that you're going to need more than this traditional data set of blog, outer, posts, and tags, you should probably immediately start considering headless CMS as your go-to option.
Right. Even if you should also try to answer the question whether you really plan to go beyond that, because even if you think that it's okay for you to start with a blog with a sort of a publishing platform, but if you know that a year from now you'll add this and this and this to your app, it might be better to start directly with a headless solution and with a custom architecture based on Jamstack or whichever stack you would prefer, than to lock yourself in with WordPress, because the more things you already have in WordPress, the bigger it grows. Then it's just more time and money that you'll have to put to actually move out of it.
Yeah, and that's the money that actually went to bin, because you're not getting that back.
But also, if you decide to go with a headless solution, it will probably be a bigger upfront cost than going with WordPress. So
because you have to build it from scratch, right?
So it's always you have to judge by yourself whether one trade-off is better or the other trade-off.
But in terms of this whole content management systems, it feels a little bit like, to me at least, that previously we would call WordPress a CMS, but it's more like blog management system. Whereas moving to headless CMSs, we're really starting to have this content management systems, because they're so powerful in terms of what you can do. You can basically set up whole applications using just headless CMS as your backend, which is basically wasn't possible before, right?
I absolutely agree. I think it was always very painful to try and model data around WordPress, because that's also what people historically try to do, and it's so easy to do that in most headless CMSs. The sole fact that you can just define your exact data shape to whatever you want, and exactly what you need is really a breath of fresh air.
Do you think that we're moving in this direction where backend is going to be mostly a set of different providers, SaaS systems, and just the front end is going to be the custom thing, and the rest is just going to be multiple vendors that you use?
I would say that's definitely maybe that's not necessarily a direction for everyone, but I would wholeheartedly recommend trying it out.
Right, and circling back to the CMSs themselves, since there is so many new ones appearing, where do you kind of see this whole thing going? Do you think it's going to consolidate and you will have 2-3 major players on the scene, and it will be just that? You will choose between one of the three, or do you think that we'll get more niche targeted CMSs for various different use cases?
I really hope we see many new players and many new growing players, because it's really refreshing to see new CMSs pop out with new set of features, where we can sort of validate new ideas and see maybe where some missing pieces in content management and content creations are. And of course, competition is good for every space. So,
do you think there's still space for innovating in terms of this niche development? So I don't know, CMS just for real estate use cases. I don't know.
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about it, but I would say that there might be a good use case for. I mean, if I could think of something, that there wouldn't be really
on our maybe examples that we have. I'm thinking that maybe a CMS that's just made for strictly mobile apps, something like that. Would it work? Would it make any sense? So it's targeted.
I think it's a good question. I'm not sure. I think that the CMS should mostly, like the headless CMS, should probably mostly focus on content and serving the content. I'm not sure if particularly targeting the platform is a good solution. Right. I think targeting particular content requirements and editing solutions might be good. For example, there are headless CMSs that really focus on the fact that you can customize everything in the admin panel, and that you can really see, like in real time, who's editing the content. So that's something probably that not a lot of people do. So I think just in general, the most space for innovation there is probably the way you interact with the content and all the things that you can do with the content and all the ways that you can manage the content, because it's a content management system.
Yeah, of course. And since there are so many, in the next episode, we'll be also talking about which solutions are probably good for you, and we'll do short market overview for 2021.
Definitely.
Thanks for the talk, Hugo.
Thanks for the talk, Kuba.